The night had a strange stillness to it, the kind that made the walls feel closer and every sound louder than normal. Emily noticed it the moment she closed the back door after watering the little row of flowers her husband, Michael, had planted earlier that spring. She wasn't used to quiet evenings. Their house in Oregon was usually full of his voice, deep, warm, steady, moving from room to room like an anchor that kept her world in place. But tonight, he was on a 3-day work trip. And the emptiness reminded her of how much she leaned on his presence. Emily wasn't alone in the house, though. Her son Adam was upstairs, finishing a late online assignment. He had just turned 23, a young man with sharp shoulders, soft eyes, and a calm nature that rarely changed. He still lived with them while he finished his last semester of college. Most days he was quiet, focused, and respectful. But tonight, something felt different, though Emily couldn't explain why. It was just a feeling, small but persistent. She moved through the kitchen, wiping the counter even though it was already clean. The faucet's slow drip echoed like a reminder of the silence around her. She tried turning on the TV for background noise, but the voices felt too loud, almost intrusive. She switched it off again. It was unusual how much she missed Michael after only one day. They had been married 25 years, long enough to know each other's routines, short enough to still feel a spark. Normally, she handled his trips well. But lately, the distance felt heavier. Maybe it was the weather, maybe her own heart feeling tenderer than usual, or maybe she simply didn't like how fast life was changing around her. Upstairs, sheared a soft thump, followed by the slow creak of footsteps. She assumed Adam was walking between his room and the hallway, stretching from long hours at the screen. She smiled to herself, imagining him rubbing the back of his neck like he always did. Emily decided to brew tea and take a cup upstairs to check on him. Not because he needed her, but because she suddenly needed to see another living face. To feel less alone in the house that felt too big without her husband. But before she could take out the tea bags, she heard footsteps coming down the stairs, slow, steady, not rushed. She froze her hand on the cupboard handle. Something about the steps made her heart tap faster in her chest. Not fear, just awareness. A moment later, Adam stepped into the kitchen doorway. "Mom?" he said softly. She turned toward him with a gentle smile. "I didn't know you were coming down." He shrugged a little and leaned one shoulder against the doorway. He looked tired, his hair slightly messy, his t-shirt wrinkled, his eyes warm but distant. For a moment, Emily felt a pinch in her chest, something motherly and emotional mixed together. Her son was growing up fast. His face looked more like a man's now than a boy's, and it hit her how quickly time had passed. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, I don't know. The house feels weird tonight." Emily laughed quietly. "You felt it too." Adam pushed himself away from the doorway and walked into the kitchen, his socks sliding softly on the tile. "Dad being away makes it feel empty. I guess we're too used to him wandering around." She handed him a glass of water without thinking, an old habit from when he was little. He accepted it the same way he always had, with a soft thanks and a small grin. "Are you hungry?" she asked. "I can warm up the pasta. I ate earlier," he replied, but then he paused. "Actually, can I sit here for a bit? I don't want to go back upstairs yet." Emily nodded and sat at the table. He took the chair across from her. It felt strange, almost like he was a guest instead of her son. He studied her for a moment, his eyes softer than usual, thoughtful in a way that made her straighten a little. "You look tired," he said gently. Emily blinked, surprised. "Do I?" He nodded. "Maybe you're just lonely with Dad gone." She opened her mouth to respond, but his words reached deeper than she expected. She wasn't lonely in a romantic way, just emotionally stretched, unusually sentimental. And hearing it from her son made her chest warm in a way she didn't fully understand. "I guess," she said. "It's just been a long week." Adam leaned his elbows on the table. "You do everything for this house, for both of us. You never complain, but I notice." The sincerity in his voice hit her like a gentle wave. Adam wasn't usually this expressive. He wasn't cold, just reserved, like many young men his age. So when he spoke from the heart, it always caught her off guard. "That means a lot to hear," she whispered, smiling softly. He looked at her for a moment longer, then slowly exhaled, almost as if he'd been holding something in. Emily's heart fluttered, not out of anything inappropriate, but from the sudden closeness between them. The house was quiet, the night was still, and for the first time in a very long time, they were having a real conversation, not about chores or school or routines, but about emotions, presence, and unspoken things. It felt deep, honest, needed. Adam's voice softened again. "Mom, you know you're not alone, right? Even when Dad's away, I'm here." The warmth in his words settled into Emily like a blanket. Her throat tightened slightly, and she fought the urge to wipe a tear that threatened to form. She wasn't sad, just overwhelmed by the rare tenderness. "I know," she said quietly. "Thank you." A small smile formed on Adam's lips, gentle, almost protective. Then something shifted. The air between them felt heavier with emotion, not uncomfortable, but full, like the moment before a long-held thought is spoken aloud. Before Emily could say anything else, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, brightened, then shut off completely. The house fell into darkness. Emily gasped softly as the kitchen sank into shadows. She heard Adam push back his chair quickly, the legs scraping the floor. "Mom, don't move," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll check the breaker." She reached out, unsure of where he was. "Wait, Adam," but before she could finish, she felt his hand touch hers in the dark. Warm, steady, reassuring. "It's okay," he murmured. "I'm right here." Emily didn't know why her heart reacted the way it did, tight, emotional, aware of the closeness, but it wasn't romantic. And it wasn't wrong. It was simply a moment, a vulnerable one shared, between a mother who felt too alone and a son who suddenly seemed far more grown than she'd realized that then he gently let go of her hand and stepped back. "I'll be right back," he promised. She listened to his footsteps fade toward the hallway, her pulse still unsteady, not out of fear, but from the sudden emotional intensity of the moment. The darkness made everything sharper, more noticeable: the quiet house, her racing thoughts, and the unexpected comfort of her son's presence. She took a slow breath, trying to calm herself, but the truth was clear. Something had changed tonight, something she didn't yet understand. And as she waited for Adam to return, Emily felt the first flicker of a mystery rising inside the quiet house, one that would shape everything that came next. And this was only the beginning. Emily sat in the dim kitchen, her hands still resting on the cold countertop, her mind replaying the brief touch of Adam's hand. It wasn't a touch that startled her inappropriately. It was human, grounding, and strangely comforting in the overwhelming quiet of the house. The darkness seemed to stretch the rooms longer, the walls closer. Every creak and groan of the old wooden floors seemed louder than usual. She could hear her own heartbeat, steady but oddly aware, as if the silence made every sound her body produced amplified. A few moments passed, and the faint shuffle of footsteps approached again from the hallway. Emily held her breath. When the figure stepped into the kitchen light, she realized it was Adam, carrying a small flashlight. The soft glow cut through the darkness, revealing his familiar face. But for some reason, she noticed every detail: the way his hair had fallen slightly over his forehead, the calm determination in his eyes, the steady set of his jaw. He wasn't just her son tonight. He was someone aware, thoughtful, and somehow more attuned to the moment than she expected. "The breaker's fine," he said, his voice calm. "Must be the fuse in the living room." He started walking toward the other end of the house, the flashlight illuminating the hallway. Emily followed instinctively, clutching the edges of the countertop as if the solid surface could anchor her. Racing thoughts, she wondered why tonight felt so different. Perhaps it was the emptiness left by Michael's absence. Or perhaps it was that rare shift in Adam's demeanor, the openness in his voice, the way he seemed to care not just for the house, but for her. There was a maturity there she hadn't seen before, And yet she felt something unspoken. A silent acknowledgement that this night's strange quiet and alone would change something about their routine, about their understanding of one another. When they reached the living room, Adam knelt to check the fuse box, his shoulders tense but careful. Emily watched him silently. There was something so reassuring about seeing him take responsibility, even for something as mundane as a fuse. She realized how much she had relied on Michael to handle things like this. And now, in his absence, Adam had stepped into that role effortlessly. It struck her how quickly children grow into the adults we once expected them to become in 20 years. Yet here was Adam stepping in now. "Looks like this one's blown," said, standing. He glanced at Emily with a small smile. "No worries, I'll fix it. You can go sit down." Emily nodded, a strange mix of relief and admiration flooding her. She had always known her son was capable. But watching him act decisively in a quiet, responsible way made her see him in a new light. There was a subtle shift between them tonight. One that wasn't about anything inappropriate, but was about connection, trust, and recognition. She returned to the kitchen, sitting down at the table. The old wooden chair creaked under her weight. The room smelled faintly of the tea she had made earlier, a comforting scent. Emily's thoughts wandered as she sipped her tea slowly, each swallow grounding her in the moment. It was these small, quiet nights that reminded her of the life they shared. The subtle bonds that often went unnoticed amid the chaos of daily living. The soft click of a door caught her attention. She looked up to see Adam returning, holding a small flashlight in one hand and a replacement fuse in the other. His movements were careful, measured, almost ritualistic. There was a gentleness in the way he handled the tools, a patience that reminded her of her own father when she was a child, tinkering quietly in the garage while she watched with wide eyes. "I've got it," he said, kneeling again by the fuse box. "Won't take long." Emily stayed seated, observing him in silence. The moment felt oddly ceremonial, as though the mundane act of replacing a fuse had become something symbolic, a gesture of care, of responsibility, and of subtle emotional understanding. She realized she had been so focused on daily tasks, routines, and schedules that she rarely noticed these small acts of her son's growth, of the way he could step in when needed. Minutes passed. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the flashlight and the faint creak of floorboards under Adam's weight. Emily's eyes followed every movement, and she found herself marveling at his patience, his methodical approach, his calmness in a situation that could have been stressful if left to chance. "Done," he said finally, standing upright. "Try the lights now." Emily flipped the switch. Light flooded the living room. It was brighter than before, warmer even, as if the restored electricity had symbolically returned life to the house. She looked at Adam, who was standing a few feet away, and noticed the subtle change in his expression. He seemed pleased, satisfied with the task accomplished. "Good job," she said softly, her voice carrying pride. He smiled briefly, a small gesture, but it held meaning. It wasn't a showy smile, it was genuine, sincere, a reflection of his quiet confidence. Emily felt a warmth rise in her chest, a feeling of connection that was both comforting and profound. It was not the excitement of drama, but the deep reassurance that her family was intact. Her son was capable, and despite Michael being away, they were okay. Then Adam moved closer to the kitchen table, sitting down across from her. He didn't say anything immediately, but the air between them was charged with unspoken communication. They didn't need words. The house was quiet, the lights were on, and the night had given them a rare moment of closeness. Emily realized she could talk about anything tonight. And for the first time in a long while, she felt truly heard. "I know Dad being away isn't easy," Adam began, his voice calm but gentle. "I mean, for you, for all of us, actually." Emily looked at him, her heart softening. "It's not," she admitted. "It's just different when he's gone. You notice everything more. Every little sound, every little creak." Adam nodded. "Yeah, it's like you suddenly pay attention to things you don't usually notice. The house feels bigger, emptier, And maybe we notice each other more too." Emily was struck by the observation. She realized he was right. The absence of someone important made the presence of others more noticeable. She felt an emotional tug at her chest, a mixture of nostalgia, appreciation, and subtle longing. These moments were fleeting, rare, and precious. For several minutes they sat in silence, drinking tea and watching the quiet house around them. Emily felt a surprising calm settle over her, a sense of being grounded despite the unusual circumstances. It wasn't excitement or drama, was something deeper, something maternal yet reciprocal. The house, normally just a backdrop to their busy lives, had become a space of reflection, connection, and understanding. Then Adam spoke again, softly. "Mom, I know you try to handle everything yourself, but it's okay to let me help. I don't mean just chores, I mean life stuff. We're all here for each other, even if Dad's gone for a few days." Emily felt her throat tighten, the words touching her more deeply than she expected. It was a simple sentiment, but profound in its honesty. She realized she had sometimes underestimated her son, not his capability, but his emotional awareness. Tonight, he wasn't just a helper or a student. He was a young man aware of others' feelings, attuned to the house, attuned to her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed to hear that." He gave a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement of mutual understanding. And then, as if the night itself demanded it, a sudden creak echoed from upstairs. The house seemed to sigh, the shadows dancing lightly across the walls. Emily glanced toward the staircase, curiosity and a hint of tension stirring within her. "Adam?" she asked, her voice gentle. He stood immediately, flashlight in hand again, moving toward the hallway. "Probably just the wind. Or the heating," he said, but his calm tone suggested both care and caution. Emily followed at a slower pace, watching him move through the house like a silent guardian. The night had shifted into something slightly unpredictable, yet full of trust, respect, and quiet drama as they moved together. Emily realized that tonight, in her husband's absence, she was seeing another side of her son, one that was mature, protective, and surprisingly attentive. The ordinary house had transformed into a stage for subtle emotional lessons, small discoveries, and heartfelt connections. And even though the fuse and lights were mundane problems, the moments spent together were extraordinary in their significance. They returned to the kitchen, and Adam finally sat down again. "Everything's okay," he said. "Lights are fixed. House is fine, Mom. I'll be here if you need anything tonight." Emily smiled, feeling a mixture of relief, warmth, and emotional closeness she hadn't felt in months. "I know," she said softly, "and I appreciate it more than you'll ever know." The night stretched on, quiet but alive. They talked about trivial things at first classes, homework, groceries, but gradually their conversation deepened, touching on memories, hopes, and small fears. It was a rare night where honesty, emotional connection, and mutual respect were the center of attention. Emily realized that life often gave unexpected moments like this. A simple event, a blown fuse. A darkened house could bring profound emotional revelations. As the clock ticked past midnight, Emily and Adam finally paused, sitting in a warm, comfortable silence. She looked at her son, and a new understanding formed in her heart. He was no longer just the boy she had raised. He was a capable, thoughtful, emotionally aware man who could step into responsibility when needed, offer comfort and companionship in ways she hadn't anticipated. Emily's heart skipped a beat at the soft knock on the back door. The sound seemed louder in the quiet night, cutting through the calm she and Adam had just shared. She exchanged a quick glance with her son, whose expression mirrored her curiosity and caution. Neither of them spoke. Words weren't necessary. They moved together toward the door, Emily slightly ahead, guided by a mixture of intrigue and cautious expectation. As Emily opened the door, a small gust of chilly night air rushed in, brushing against her face. Standing there under the dim glow of the porch light was her neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker. She looked concerned. Holding a small envelope in her hand, Emily's tension eased slightly. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a problem to solve, just someone who had noticed the quiet house and wanted to check in. Emily. I thought I'd bring this by, Mrs. Whitaker said, offering the envelope. It came for you earlier, but you weren't home. Thought you should have it tonight. Emily took it, her fingers brushing the paper. The handwriting was familiar. She recognized it immediately. Michael. Her husband had sent a note ahead of his return, something personal meant to reach her before he walked in. The sudden thought of him, so far away, yet thinking of her, stirred a mixture of longing, warmth, and subtle comfort. Thank you, Emily said softly, glancing at Adam, who nodded encouragingly. I appreciate it. Mrs. Whitaker smiled briefly. I'll leave you two to it then. Sounds like a quiet night here, but sometimes quiet is good. She turned and walked back down the steps, leaving the envelope and the lingering sense of anticipation behind. Emily closed the door, leaning against it for a moment as she broke the seal. Inside, a neatly folded note waited. Michael's familiar handwriting filled the page with thoughtful words, simple, loving, and reflective. He wrote about missing her, about appreciating the little things she did, and about looking forward to returning home. There was nothing dramatic or urgent, but the intimacy of the note, the subtle reminders of their bond, filled Emily with an unexpected warmth. Adam watched quietly from the doorway of the kitchen, giving her space, yet his presence was comforting. Emily realized once again how different this night had been. It had started with minor inconveniences, a blown fuse, darkness. A quiet house, but it had become something profound, a night of connection, awareness, and small, meaningful gestures. Adam had been more than a son tonight. He had been a partner in navigating the unusual calm of an empty house, a witness to her emotions, a subtle guide through quiet reflection. After reading the note, Emily folded it gently and set it on the counter. She felt a renewed sense of calm, an understanding that even in Michael's absence, love and connection still existed through letters, through gestures, through moments like this one with her son. It was a reminder that relationships didn't always require grand actions. Sometimes the quiet, steady care of those around you was enough to sustain the heart. Adam approached, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He placed one in front of Emily, then settled into the chair across from her. Looks like Dad's thinking of you, he said lightly, trying to keep the tone casual, though she could hear the sincerity in his voice. Emily smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips. Yes, she said. He always does. Even when he's far away, he finds ways to reach me. The warmth of the tea, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the quiet of the house combined to create a rare moment of peace. Emily felt herself exhaling, releasing the tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. For a long time, life had been busy, filled with schedules, errands, work, and constant movement. Tonight, she realized moments like this, moments of pause, reflection, and quiet emotional connection were rare treasures. Adam leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. Mom, can I ask you something? Emily raised an eyebrow, curious. Of course. He hesitated, then continued. Do you think sometimes we underestimate the quiet moments? Like, we focus on the big events, the holidays, the celebrations, but maybe the small, ordinary nights are the ones that really matter. Emily considered his words. She realized they were true. Tonight, the fuse had blown, the lights had gone out. The house had seemed empty, but it was in that emptiness that she had truly noticed Adam, truly appreciated the little things, and truly felt the love that bound their family. Yes, she said slowly, softly. I think you're right. Sometimes the quiet moments teach us more than the big ones ever could. Adam nodded, a small smile touching his lips. He sipped his tea, glancing around the room. I think tonight's one of those nights. Emily chuckled lightly, a warm, melodic sound that filled the quiet kitchen. Yes, she agreed. It really is. The conversation shifted naturally from small observations about the house to memories of past events, family vacations, and funny incidents that made them laugh. The night seemed to stretch and bend around them, giving space for reflection, connection, and shared memories. Emily felt lighter, as though the simple act of talking, of being present with Adam had lifted a weight she hadn't known she carried. As the evening progressed, Emily noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. The darkness outside seemed deeper, yet inside the kitchen, the warmth of the lights, the aroma of tea, and the calm presence of her son created a cocoon of safety and comfort. She realized how much she valued these moments, these nights when the ordinary became extraordinary, simply because of connection, trust, and emotional awareness. "Mom," Adam said softly, breaking into her thoughts, "I just want you to know, I'm proud of you. I know Dad being away isn't easy, but you handle it so well. I notice how much you do for all of us." Emily's chest tightened. She wasn't used to hearing such direct appreciation. The words, simple yet profound, filled her with an unexpected warmth. "Thank you, Adam," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot to me." They sat in silence for a few moments, letting the words linger. Emily realized that the quiet, the warmth, the understanding between them was the kind of emotional connection she hadn't felt in months. Life often moved too fast, too busy, and she had forgotten how restorative it could be to simply sit, to be seen, and to see others in return. Just then, a distant sound of a car door slamming echoed from the driveway. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Could it be Michael? She stood and moved toward the window, peeking through the curtains. The familiar shape of her husband's car was visible, headlights cutting through the dark driveway. Her heart lifted, a surge of joy and relief flooding her senses. Michael was home. Adam noticed her movement and followed, standing beside her. They watched silently as Michael approached the front door, keys in hand, smiling tiredly but warmly. Emily felt a rush of gratitude for the safe return of her husband, for the quiet courage of her son, and for the unexpected night of connection that had prepared her for this moment. When Michael stepped inside, Emily felt the house shift again, not in darkness, not in emptiness, but in warmth, love, and shared relief. He smiled at her, noticing the calm yet radiant look on her face. "I'm home," he said softly. Emily smiled back. "I know. I've missed you." Adam watched the reunion, a small, quiet smile on his face. He had played his part tonight not as a replacement, but as a bridge of presence that allowed his mother to feel secure, appreciated, and emotionally connected in ways she hadn't expected. The family settled into the living room, the evening stretching into conversation, laughter, and shared stories. Emily realized that while the night had begun with challenges and a quiet house, it had ended in understanding, warmth, and a renewed sense of family. Each of them had contributed, Michael with his thoughtful note, Adam with his quiet assistance and emotional presence, and Emily with her openness to connection and reflection. As the night wound down and the household grew quiet again, Emily sat with her cup of tea, reflecting on the unexpected lessons of the evening. She realized that connection didn't always require grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes it was found in the simple acts, helping with a fuse, sharing a cup of tea, exchanging quiet words, and noticing one another. And in that quiet, reflective moment, Emily knew she would remember this night forever, not for the interruptions or the small technical issues, but for the subtle emotional threads that had woven her family closer together. The house, once empty and silent, now felt alive with understanding, love, and subtle joy. Emily looked at Adam and then at Michael, her heart full. Tonight had been ordinary in many ways, but extraordinary in the emotional resonance it left behind. It had been a night of connection, a night of quiet lessons, and a night that reminded her that sometimes the simplest gestures, attention, care, presence were the most powerful of all. And as Emily finally set her empty cup aside and leaned back in her chair, she knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges came, the quiet moments of love, trust, and emotional presence would always be the foundation of her family. The night, which had started with darkness and uncertainty, ended with warmth, connection, an unspoken understanding, a night that none of them would ever forget.